Welcome to the Corinthian Catalyst Episode 2. Last time we talked about why First Corinthians was such a cool book. We talked about the desert island question, what was unique about it, but more importantly, we talked about why the letter of First Corinthians, the book, was written not just to the church in Corinth, but to all the Christian world. And I understand that that thread was not followed through all the way it should have been. But we will pick it up in later episodes. That's kind of the review of last episode. Let's get into today. So today we're going over three things, really. We're going to go over the structure for the future of the Corinthian Catalyst. Then we're going to get into the more fun stuff, which is talking about Paul, who he was, his life. And then lastly, we're going to ask and answer the question, what makes an apostle an apostle? Yeah, let's get into the structure of the Corinthian Catalyst. So let me check my notes here. Yeah, so we talked about, in last episode, we talked about it being a little bit more universal of a book, a 101 Christianity. And that word might kind of scare people a little bit, saying that it's more universal to other people rather than culturally relative. What I'm kind of getting at is that this book is apostolic teaching, which is a less scary word for people. And so, what we're going to do for the next 3, 4 episodes, could be 2, we'll see, is we're going to go over a mini series of the apostles. Now, I get it, that is context, but that's not really the content of First Corinthians, but it's really important to go over that context because all throughout First, even Second, but especially in First Corinthians, he's really appealing to his apostolic authority, as well as the authority that all apostles have when they come to Corinth. That's the little mini series, and then once we get done with the mini series, we are going to go over our sources. You know, am I just making this all up? Maybe what does other people have to say about some of these verses? Um, Let me pull this up. You know, we'll go over kind of some of these people. Let me hold that up straight so you can read that. So N.T. Wright's biography of Paul. You could also just read the Bible too. So just read through the book of Acts. That would be great. Just in general, it'll help in this series, this whole channel, if you read through First Corinthians. If you've never done it, just go ahead and do it. I highly encourage it. There's a lot of stuff that's very confusing that I've been digesting for many years now. And that's why I actually wanted to do the channel in the first place, is to actually journey through those things. So, but just read it yourself. In general, this channel will be a much better benefit to you if you first just read through the whole book of First Corinthians. Other books like Acts and stuff will be really good as well. After we go over the sources for First Corinthians, maybe we'll dip into, we could do a Q&A episode, or we could do just going over some of the comments that you guys leave, emails or whatnot. Just specify if you do email, if you don't want some of that content to end up on a future episode, we could do an episode like that. And then lastly, we'll probably get into the actual meat, the content of First Corinthians, which I'm actually most excited for. But it's not going to be completely verse by verse where we just go through one verse and then talk about it and go through another verse and then talk about it. Paul, what he does is as he's talking, he'll talk for maybe 9, 10 verses, and then he'll go on a rabbit trail that's loosely tied to those 9, 10 verses. And then it's like 2 chapters later, it's like 60 verses later, that he'll pick up that same topic and then close out that topic. And so instead of just going verse by verse and following him down the rabbit trail, we'll do it a little bit more thematic. And so, yeah, that's kind of the structure going forward. There's also kind of a logical progression to each of these episodes. And so hopefully you'll end up not missing any of them. But if you do, you can go back and rewatch them. I was intending this when I was first thinking about going about starting this channel and whatnot. I was wanting to do maybe like a book, or I even had a little Bible study in the last state that I lived in. Here we are. So the logical progression is there, uh, because it was going to be in like a book form. I have been digesting it for a long time. So I have lots of thoughts about this particular uh, scriptural book. Yeah, I'm excited for all of that. And let's go on to the topic of the story of Paul. So, Paul was born in Tarshish, and he grew up in a fairly wealthy family who trained him from a very young age to be a Pharisaic Jew. In those days, which was the early aughts of the 80s, so 80-10, 80-20, in those days there was many Jewish sects, different types of Judaisms. And, for example, there was the Sadducees, who had a lot to do with the temple. They didn't believe people were going to resurrect from the dead. So this was an idea in Judaism, in specifically Pharisaic Judaism. So when Jesus interacts with the Pharisees, they actually have a lot of beliefs that overlap. And one of them is the resurrection of the body. Whereas a different type of Judaism, the Sadducees, didn't believe in the resurrection whatsoever. Paul was studying to be a Pharisee, a type of lawyer for Judaism, specifically the law, which is the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. Those are the ones he studied. But he studied the whole Old Testament, and in Tarsus, which is in Greece, that city had a lot of cultural integration, I guess, from different cultures, and so uh, it's believed that he knew a bunch of philosophy, Platonism, Aristotelianism. He was very well cultured and educated. And if he was that, it means he was part of the upper class. You didn't just sit around reading books if you were just a peasant or whatnot. You were trying to survive. If you were just a peasant in those days, it was a lot harder. He was a Roman citizen, which is pretty unique for Jewish people in general. And we'll go into why that is later on. So, Paul, being a devout Jew, Pharisaic Jew, um, interacts with this new upstart Judaism. And, it's about Christ, and it's called The Way, people of the Way. And he starts interacting with people who are persecuting Christians. So the first time he appears on our radar in the biblical text is in Acts, when Stephen, the first martyr of Christianity, is being stoned. So it says that they laid the clothes of Stephen, his possessions, in front of Paul. And then he goes on, actually, his name is Saul at that time. So Saul Paul goes on to try and stamp out the Christianity in a city called Damascus, which is in the area of Israel. And when he is going to Damascus, Jesus Christ appears in a light and blinds him, and he realizes all his ways of thinking about God, Judaism, needs to be rethought. He needs to go back to basics. He gets blinded for 3 days. He repents and he converts to Christianity. But he definitely still holds a lot of that, a lot of his teaching, but it's just reworked in his brain. So Paul goes on from here to kind of disappear off the map. And obviously, so we know that he stays for like a couple years in Arabia, 3 years maybe, goes to Jerusalem. We know he ends up back at Tarsus, his hometown. At his hometown, it could be anywhere from 3 to 4 years after that, 3 to 4 years to 11 years. So AD 35 to AD 46, he could be in Tarsus. And when he's in, how he leaves there is Barnabas, an apostle, comes and brings him back to Antioch, where there's a lot of Gentiles, non-Jewish people converting to the way, converting to Christianity. So what ends up happening is he stays there, and from Antioch he gets sent off to go to other Gentile cities like Tarsus, which he probably was evangelizing there. I'm not sure. No one really knows what he was doing for those 14 years, but he got sent off from that church in Antioch to go to other Gentile cities where there are synagogues, where there are Jewish people, as well as a bunch of Greek people and Gentile people, and to tell them about the way, which is, as we know it today, Christianity. And so he goes and he has a very successful, I'm not sure exactly how long that missionary journey was, maybe 1, 2 years. He has a very successful journey there. And he comes back and there's a council, a bunch of stuff happens, read about it in Acts. And then he gets sent off again on his second missionary journey. And one of the cities he hits is Corinth. So there's no church in Corinth. There was a synagogue. We'll end up going over a little bit more what happens. First ends up in Corinth on his second missionary journey. Basically, he starts this church and is there for at this one church for a year and a half. So a very important church for Paul, the Apostle Paul, to be stopped at. And so he stops there, starts the church, and then he goes to other churches. He continues his second missionary journey. It's not finished yet. And he has to write letters. That's when we have his first letter to the Thessalonians. So that's kind of the story of Paul. That's how we end up getting 1 Corinthians. And I understand there's a lot more that needs to be said. We're just kind of running out of time. So do all the YouTubey things, like, subscribe. We'll just pick up the thread for our mini series on the apostles next time. We'll even pick up the story a little bit more. And so I'm glad you could join me. And that's the way it was. And that's the way the cookie crumbles. And that's the way I like it. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Huh?